On the night of October 17, 1881, every gas lamp in Eastgate village went dark at exactly 9:47 p.m. In that same instant, 3 entire families, the Harrisons, the Millers, and the O'Briens, vanished without a trace. When dawn broke over the Pennsylvania hills, 18 souls had disappeared, leaving behind only cold meals on dining tables and doors left wide open to the autumn wind. But before we dive into this chilling mystery that would haunt Eastgate Village for generations to come, I want you to do something for me. If this story is already giving you goosebumps, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our darkest tales. And tell me in the comments, what city and country are you listening from? I love hearing from our community of mystery lovers around the world. Your support keeps these forgotten stories alive. Now, let's return to that fateful night in 1881, when the lights died and families vanished into the Pennsylvania darkness. According to the fragmented records that survived in the village archives and the whispered accounts passed down through generations, what happened that October evening would forever change the understanding of how far human greed could reach into the heart of a trusting community. Eastgate Village sat nestled in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, a community of roughly 400 souls who had carved out a modest existence from the unforgiving terrain. The village had grown around a natural gas deposit discovered in 1876, transforming what had once been a struggling farming settlement into a beacon of modern progress. Gas lamps lined the main thoroughfare, and most homes enjoyed the luxury of gas heating and lighting, a remarkable achievement for such a remote location. The man responsible for this transformation was Benjamin Eastgate, a shrewd businessman in his mid-40s who had arrived from Pittsburgh with promises of prosperity and progress. Eastgate had invested heavily in the gas extraction and distribution system, employing nearly a quarter of the village's working men in his operation. His modest plant sat on the eastern edge of town, a collection of metal tanks, pipes, and processing equipment that hummed with constant activity. The village itself maintained the tight-knit character typical of Pennsylvania's rural communities. Families had lived there for generations, their names carved into the headstones of St. Mary's Cemetery, dating back to the 1790s. The Harrison family ran the general store, while the Millers operated the grain mill that served the surrounding farms. The O'Briens, Irish immigrants who had arrived in the 1860s, had established themselves as skilled carpenters and blacksmiths. What made these 3 families particularly notable was their vocal opposition to recent developments in the village. A mining company from Philadelphia had been quietly purchasing properties throughout the region, offering sums that seemed generous, but came with the requirement that families relocate permanently. The Harrison, Miller, and O'Brien families had formed an informal coalition, arguing that the offers were far below the true value of their ancestral lands, and that the mining operations would destroy the village's character and natural beauty. Their resistance had created tension within the community. Some families, struggling with poor harvests and mounting debts, viewed the mining company's offers as providential. Others, particularly the older residents, supported the 3 families' stance. Benjamin Eastgate had publicly remained neutral, but those close to him noted his increasing irritability whenever the subject arose during town meetings. The autumn of 1881 had been particularly harsh. An early frost had damaged crops, and several families found themselves facing a difficult winter. The gas system, however, continued to provide reliable heating and lighting, a source of pride for Eastgate and comfort for the villagers who had grown dependent on its convenience. October 17, 1881, began like any other autumn day in Eastgate Village. The morning mist clung to the valleys as farmers completed their harvest preparations, and children walked to the one-room schoolhouse on Maple Street. Sarah Jenkins, the village's postmistress, later recalled that all 3 families had seemed in normal spirits when they collected their mail that morning. Thomas Harrison had mentioned to several neighbors that he expected a visit from a lawyer representing the mining company that evening, though he seemed confident in his decision to refuse their latest offer. Mary Miller had been seen hanging laundry behind the mill, singing Irish ballads as she worked. Patrick O'Brien had spent the afternoon shoeing horses at his forge, the rhythmic ring of his hammer echoing through the village as it had for nearly 15 years. As evening approached, the familiar routine of lighting the gas lamps began. Street lamps flickered to life one by one as the sun set behind the Pennsylvania hills. In homes throughout the village, families gathered around gas-lit dining tables for their evening meals. The Harrison household had prepared a pot roast that filled their kitchen with the aroma of herbs and vegetables. The Millers were enjoying a simple supper of bread, cheese, and preserved apples. The O'Briens had invited their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to share a meal of Irish stew. At exactly 9:47 p.m., according to the station clock at the general store, every gas flame in Eastgate village died simultaneously. The village plunged into complete darkness, broken only by the occasional flicker of a candle or oil lamp in homes that still maintained such old-fashioned alternatives. Samuel Whitmore, the village constable, was walking his evening patrol when the lights failed. His first thought was a mechanical problem at Eastgate's gas plant, but as he made his way through the darkened streets, guided only by the pale moonlight, he began to notice something far more disturbing than a simple gas failure. The front door of the Harrison house stood wide open, spilling candlelight onto the front porch. Inside, the dining table was set for 4, with plates of food that remained warm to the touch. Thomas Harrison's jacket hung on its usual peg by the door, and Mary Harrison's knitting lay abandoned in her favorite chair, the needles still holding stitches. Their 2 children, ages 8 and 12, had left their school books open on the kitchen table, as if they had simply stepped away for a moment. At the Miller property, Constable Whitmore found an even more puzzling scene. The front door was locked, but when he peered through the windows, he could see that the family's evening meal remained untouched on the table. A pot of tea sat cooling on the stove, and fresh bread lay sliced on the cutting board. The mill wheel continued to turn in the nearby stream, creaking softly in the autumn night, but there was no sign of the family that had operated it for over 2 decades. The O'Brien household presented the most disturbing discovery of all. The door was ajar, and Mrs. Patterson's shawl lay crumpled on the front steps. Inside, the Irish stew still simmered on the stove, and a half-finished letter lay on Patrick's desk, the ink still wet where his pen had been writing. Most unnervingly, 5 place settings remained at the table, but only 4 had been used. The 5th plate, intended for Mrs. Patterson, remained empty and clean. Mrs. Patterson herself was found 2 hours later, wandering the outskirts of the village in a state of severe confusion. When questioned by Constable Whitmore, she could only repeat that she had been invited to dinner, had knocked on the O'Brien door, and then found herself walking along the creek with no memory of the intervening hours. Dr. Marcus Webb, the village physician, examined her and found no signs of injury, but noted that her pupils were unusually dilated and her speech slightly slurred. Symptoms he attributed to shock. In the days following the disappearances, Eastgate village transformed from a community of quiet prosperity into a place haunted by questions and fear. Constable Whitmore sent word to the county sheriff, and within a week, investigators from Pittsburgh arrived to examine the scene. They found no signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry, and no indication that the families had planned to leave voluntarily. The investigation revealed several puzzling details. All 3 families had left behind their life savings, small amounts hidden in various locations throughout their homes. The Harrisons had saved nearly $200 in a tin box beneath their floorboards. The Millers kept their money in a mason jar hidden behind preserves in their cellar. The O'Briens had sewn their savings into the lining of Patrick's work coat. For families considering relocation, leaving behind their entire financial resources made no sense. Even more puzzling was the condition of their belongings. Clothes remained neatly folded in drawers, family photographs stood undisturbed on mantels, and personal items that would surely be taken on any journey, Bibles, family heirlooms, children's treasured toys, remained exactly where they had always been. Benjamin Eastgate cooperated fully with the investigation, providing detailed records of his gas distribution system and explaining the mechanical failure that had caused the village-wide outage. He attributed the problem to a pressure valve malfunction at his plant, a type of failure that could indeed cause the simultaneous extinguishing of all flames connected to the system. His explanation was technically sound, and investigators found no reason to doubt his account. The mining company's representatives also faced scrutiny, but they provided alibis for their whereabouts on October 17th and produced correspondence showing they had planned to meet with the families the following week, not that evening. The lawyer whom Thomas Harrison had mentioned expecting never materialized, and no record of such an appointment could be found. As weeks turned to months, the official investigation stagnated. The county sheriff's department classified the case as an unexplained disappearance, noting the unusual circumstances but finding no evidence of foul play. The families were declared legally missing, and their properties were eventually administered by the county court. But for the residents of Eastgate Village, the mystery was far from closed. Many began to notice subtle changes in their community that couldn't be explained by grief alone. Mrs. Patterson, the only witness to the events at the O'Brien house, never fully recovered her memory of that evening. She began experiencing periodic episodes of confusion and memory loss that Dr. Webb couldn't explain. Other villagers reported strange dreams and occasional feelings of disorientation, particularly during the evening hours. The winter of 1881 to 1882 brought unusual hardships to Eastgate Village. Several residents fell ill with a mysterious ailment, characterized by persistent headaches, fatigue, and episodes of confusion. Dr. Webb struggled to diagnose the condition, which seemed to affect people randomly and recover just as mysteriously. Some villagers began to whisper about curses and supernatural retribution for the unexplained disappearances. It was during this difficult period that James Crawford, a young man who had worked at Eastgate's gas plant, began to experience troubling nightmares. In his dreams, he saw the missing families trapped in darkness, calling for help. The dreams were so vivid and disturbing that he sought counsel from Father Michael O'Sullivan at St. Mary's Church. During their conversations, Crawford began to piece together disturbing recollections from his work at the gas plant. Crawford remembered that in the weeks leading up to October 17th, Benjamin Eastgate had been conducting unusual experiments with the gas mixture. Eastgate had claimed he was working to improve the efficiency of the fuel, but he had sworn his workers to secrecy about the specific nature of their modifications. Crawford recalled handling strange chemical additives and noted that Eastgate had insisted on personally overseeing the gas distribution to certain areas of the village, specifically the neighborhoods where the Harrison, Miller, and O'Brien families lived. More troubling still, Crawford began to remember a conversation he had overheard between Eastgate and a man he didn't recognize. Sometime in early October, the stranger had spoken about clearing the remaining obstacles and had mentioned specific addresses that Crawford now realized corresponded to the homes of the 3 missing families. At the time, he had assumed they were discussing routine maintenance, but the context now seemed far more sinister. Driven by his growing suspicions and the weight of his nightmares, Crawford decided to investigate the gas plant during one of his off-duty periods. On a cold February night in 1882, he used his knowledge of the facility to gain access to areas that had been off-limits to regular workers. What he discovered in Eastgate's private laboratory would haunt him for the rest of his life. Hidden in a locked cabinet, Crawford found detailed records of gas mixture modifications, including the addition of various chemical compounds that he didn't recognize. More damning still, he discovered a map of the village's gas distribution system, with specific homes marked in red ink, the same homes where the families had vanished. Accompanying the map were notes in Eastgate's handwriting that discussed optimal concentration levels and timing of exposure. But the most horrifying discovery was a leather-bound journal containing what appeared to be a detailed plan for the systematic elimination of families opposing the mining company's expansion. The journal revealed that Eastgate had been secretly working with the Philadelphia Mining Company, receiving substantial payments for his cooperation in solving the resistance problem. The entries described the development of a gas mixture that included carbon monoxide and other toxic compounds, designed to be odorless and capable of causing rapid unconsciousness followed by death. The journal's final entries, dated just days before October 17th, outlined the plan for the night of the disappearances. The toxic gas would be delivered specifically to the targeted homes through modified distribution lines. The simultaneous failure of all gas lights was intended to provide cover for the operation and create confusion about the timing of events. The bodies of the victims were to be removed during the darkness and disposed of in a manner that would prevent discovery. Crawford's discovery presented him with a terrible dilemma. Benjamin Eastgate was not only a respected member of the community, but also Crawford's employer and the person responsible for the livelihood of many village families. More importantly, Crawford realized that if his suspicions were correct, Eastgate had committed mass murder and was likely capable of eliminating anyone who threatened to expose him. Rather than confronting Eastgate directly or approaching the village constable, Crawford decided to gather additional evidence that would make a case so strong that Eastgate couldn't escape justice. He began secretly copying documents from the laboratory and looking for physical evidence of the crime. His investigation led him to examine the gas distribution system more carefully, particularly the areas serving the 3 missing families' homes. What Crawford discovered beneath the Harrison house changed everything. Using his knowledge of the gas line layout, he accessed the crawl space beneath their home and found that the gas line had been modified with an additional valve and connection that didn't appear on any official diagrams. Following this modification, he traced it to a buried tank hidden among the trees behind the house. A tank that still contained residual traces of the toxic gas mixture. Similar modifications were found at the Miller and O'Brien properties. Each home had been fitted with a secondary gas delivery system capable of delivering concentrated amounts of the poisonous mixture directly into their living spaces. The sophistication of the modifications suggested extensive planning and technical expertise. Crawford also made another chilling discovery while examining the gas plant's furnace system. In the ash pit of the main incinerator, he found fragments of personal belongings that he recognized, buttons from clothing worn by the missing family members, metal clasps from handbags, and small pieces of jewelry that had somehow survived the intense heat. The implications were horrifyingly clear. The bodies of the 18 victims had been destroyed in the very facility that had provided heat and light to their community. As Crawford gathered this evidence, he began to notice that he was being watched. Eastgate seemed to be paying unusual attention to his work schedule and had begun asking probing questions about his activities. Other workers mentioned that Eastgate had been inquiring about Crawford's personal life and had even visited Crawford's boarding house to speak with his landlady. The pressure of his secret investigation began to take its toll on Crawford's health and peace of mind. He started experiencing the same symptoms that had plagued other villagers: headaches, confusion, and disturbing dreams. He realized that Eastgate might be using low-level gas poisoning to maintain control over potential witnesses and to explain away any suspicious behavior as illness. Just as you think this story couldn't get any darker, the horror in Eastgate Village intensifies. If this tale is sending chills down your spine, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Give it a like to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Let's find out together how Crawford's terrifying discovery unfolds. Crawford knew he was running out of time. His investigation had revealed the scope of Eastgate's crimes, but he needed to find a way to expose the truth without becoming the next victim. He decided to create a detailed written account of his findings and hide copies in multiple locations around the village, ensuring that the truth would survive even if he didn't. On the night of March 15, 1882, James Crawford made his final visit to the gas plant. He had prepared 3 copies of his evidence, hiding them in locations he believed would eventually be discovered: behind a loose stone in St. Mary's Church, beneath the floorboards of the village school, and in a waterproof container buried near the mill wheel where it would be found when the spring floods receded. His plan was to confront Eastgate with the evidence and demand a public confession. But as he entered the plant that night, he realized that Eastgate had been expecting him. The older man was waiting in the laboratory, surrounded by the very documents that Crawford had been secretly copying. "I wondered how long it would take you to piece it together," Eastgate said calmly, his voice carrying none of the warmth that had once characterized his public persona. "You always were the most observant of my workers." Crawford demanded to know why Eastgate had murdered innocent families, but the answer revealed a level of calculated greed that shocked even someone prepared for the worst. Eastgate explained that the mining company had offered him a partnership worth over $50,000, a fortune that would set him up for life, in exchange for clearing the properties of resistant families. The gas plant had provided the perfect method and cover for the crimes. "They trusted me," Eastgate said with chilling matter-of-factness. "They invited me into their homes, relied on my gas for their daily lives. It was simply a matter of modifying the mixture and timing the delivery correctly. The carbon monoxide rendered them unconscious within minutes, and the other compounds ensured they never woke up. By morning, there was nothing left but ash in my furnace." Eastgate revealed that he had been slowly poisoning other potential witnesses with low-level gas exposure, causing the mysterious illnesses that had plagued the village throughout the winter. Mrs. Patterson's memory loss wasn't due to shock. She had received a concentrated dose of the toxic mixture that had damaged her ability to form new memories. But Eastgate had made one critical error in his planning. He had underestimated the determination of one young man to seek justice for the innocent. Crawford had anticipated this confrontation and had prepared one final surprise. Earlier that evening, Crawford had sabotaged the gas plant's main pressure system, creating a timer-delayed failure that would shut down the entire facility and alert the county authorities to investigate. More importantly, he had rigged the plant's main gas line to release its contents into the laboratory where they now stood, ensuring that if Eastgate tried to harm him, they would both succumb to the same toxic mixture that had killed the families. As the gas began to hiss from the modified pipes, Crawford realized that he had become both the solution to the mystery and its final victim. But unlike the 18 innocent souls who had died unknowingly, he faced his fate with the knowledge that justice would finally be served. The explosion at the gas plant on March 16, 1882, shattered windows throughout Eastgate Village and brought investigators rushing from Pittsburgh within hours. The destruction of the facility revealed the hidden tanks, modified equipment, and chemical supplies that comprised Eastgate's murder apparatus. Both Crawford and Eastgate perished in the blast, but Crawford's carefully hidden evidence survived to tell the complete story. The investigation that followed vindicated Crawford's findings and revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The Philadelphia Mining Company's records, subpoenaed during the investigation, showed payments to Eastgate, totaling nearly $30,000 in the months leading up to October 17th. Several company executives were arrested and tried for conspiracy to commit murder, though their superior legal resources resulted in relatively light sentences compared to the magnitude of their crimes. The missing families were finally laid to rest in a memorial service at St. Mary's Church, though their remains were never recovered from the ashes of the gas plant. The village erected a simple monument bearing their names and the inscription, "Murdered for refusing to abandon their home." Mrs. Patterson never fully recovered her memory, but her periodic episodes of confusion ceased after the gas plant's destruction. Other villagers who had suffered from the mysterious winter ailments found their symptoms disappearing as well, confirming that Eastgate had been systematically poisoning potential witnesses. The village of Eastgate was eventually abandoned as families moved away, unable to live with the memories of what had happened there. The mining company acquired the properties they had coveted, but at a cost far greater than the resistance they had sought to eliminate. The scandal destroyed their corporate reputation and led to new regulations governing industrial expansion in rural Pennsylvania communities. James Crawford was buried with full honors in St. Mary's Cemetery, his headstone bearing the simple inscription, "He gave his life so that truth might live." The 3 locations where he had hidden his evidence became informal shrines where residents would leave flowers and remember the 18 innocent victims of one man's greed. This tragedy reminds us that the greatest horrors often come not from supernatural forces but from the calculated evil that can lurk behind a trusted neighbor's smile. The families of Eastgate Village died not because of ancient curses or mysterious phenomena, but because their lives were deemed less valuable than mining rights and corporate profits. What do you think about this story? Do you believe that the complete truth about Eastgate Village was ever revealed, or do you think there were other secrets buried with the gas plant? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dark tale from America's hidden history and want more stories like this, subscribe to our channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates the darker chapters of our past. Thank you for joining me in uncovering another forgotten tragedy, and I'll see you in the next video.